Hey guys, Scott here. Today we're going to be looking at the developer update for May 2025. This is basically the patch on the PTB we're going to get for Five Nights at Freddy's. These have the promised quality of life changes that were mentioned several months ago. And this is not necessarily final, but this is a pretty good summary of what we're going to be getting. Some of these patch notes are not completely finished, but we'll be getting the full thing starting on the PTB for specific perk changes and things like that. But I really wanted to go over the actual quality of life changes because these, I think, are the really important things that need to be done correctly, especially if we're going to have like a bunch of new players with Five Nights at Freddy's. It's going to be something that needs to be done very, very well. So let's go over the very first one at the start. The going next prevention. Going next is basically killing yourself on hook as survivor and doing that too early when the match is not necessarily over. You're just doing it because you don't like what you're going against, or the killer's, I don't know, playing too sweaty for you, whatever dumb reason you have for doing it. People going next is extremely annoying on killer and survivor. On killer, it's dumb if someone goes next immediately because now you're in a 3v1. It's almost impossible to lose and it's not really fun anymore. For survivor, you can't really win anymore, so it's bad for you. It's just bad for everybody. People killing themselves on a hook is one of the most annoying things that happens in Dead by Daylight, and they are trying to fix that. The problem is this is really hard to automate, and this is the thing I think a lot of us are the most scared of. Because, like I said, you can't really fully prove that someone is doing this unless it's a really consistent pattern, which maybe they're going to be trying to do there. It's really hard to automate this process. Look, if they do it correctly, then hats off to behavior. This is incredible. This is a really, really good change. But I and a lot of other people are very concerned that they're not going to automate this system properly, again, because it is very complicated. And after the way that they've automated their MMR to detect whether you win or lose just based off of one variable, pretty much, that's why a lot of people are concerned about this, because they don't have a great track record with that kind of stuff. But let's just go into it. So, added a system to identify whether a survivor sacrifice is an intentional attempt at going next. Again, lots of ifs, maybes, I'm not sure is there. If a player is identified as intentionally going next, they will receive a disconnection penalty point. I'm assuming that just means you get what is the equivalent of you disconnecting from one match, which means, you know, your first time it would be a minute ban, then 5 minutes and so forth, getting exponentially higher and higher duration bans until you pretty much can't play the game for, you know, like a week. But that's pretty hard to actually get to that point. You have to disconnect a lot to ever get to that point. So that's what that does. Next, remove the option to self-unhook on first hook stages unless they have one of the following equipped: slippery meat, up the ante, or a luck offering. So this is kind of weird in my opinion. This is just really abusable, and also it gives plausible deniability to someone that is trying to go next. And again, the main thing we're trying to avoid here is banning people or giving them disconnection penalties when they're not actually trolling, when they're not actually just going next because they're being a little shit. You have to be so careful with that. I can already think of a number of ways this can be abused. So first of all, I already know people right now that intentionally equip Shoulder the Burden to be able to kill themselves quicker in matches. So if they're having a match that is not going well, they actually have Shoulder the Burden on just to just be able to get out of the match quicker. It's insane. It's stupid. I completely agree, but this is something that is actually happening. Now, is this going to be abused very often? I don't necessarily think so. I don't think it's going to be a huge consistent thing where people are, you know, just intentionally entering matches just to kill themselves. There are some psychos that do that, but that's really not what the majority of people are doing. So it's abusable to some extent, but not a lot. Now, the other problem with this is if someone is killing themselves a lot, they could just be like, hey, I'm just trying to get slippery meat value. Why'd you ban me? And unfortunately for some people, it'll be a valid question, because there will be some people that have this new slippery meat build that Oz posted or something, and it looks super fun, blah, blah, blah. I want to try it. Now you got, you know, some, you know, Timmy new player is putting on this perk, tries to Kobe, and it doesn't work, and then he's basically killing himself. Maybe he tries that, you know, for a couple of games in a row. Is the system now going to go, oh, he's tried to kill himself a couple of games in a row, let's penalize him now? Guy gets penalized, he has no idea why. So this is what I'm talking about, and it's very, very scary to do things like this, because we don't know if someone is actually just trying to get value from their perk, or they're just trying to kill themselves. It's really, again, hard to automate. I'm assuming there's going to be pattern recognition, but if there's a pattern of a guy simply trying to get value from a perk, how can you prove he's being malicious about it? There's no way to prove that. He's just trying to use the perk. So It just seems really abusable to me, and I don't really know how that's going to work. Interesting that Deliverance is not on here, because like if you don't have the option to self unhook, then it means you can't use Deliverance. So I'm assuming they just forgot to add it there because they're not going to just remove the perk Deliverance. So this whole thing I think is too abusable, and I almost kind of prefer that they like just didn't tell us a lot of the stuff that they're doing because the information on it makes it just too abusable. So I'm very concerned with this stuff. Next, added the unlocks the ability to attempt to unhook yourself to luck offerings. So you don't even need to equip a perk if you just want to be able to go next. I'm sure everyone has 80 trillion luck offerings at this point because nobody really ever uses them. So people are going to be able to go next still for probably years if they want to by just running luck offerings. Again, unless the system is really good at detecting patterns of doing this almost every game or something like that. It's all going to come down to a bunch of ifs and how the system works. So if it works perfectly, holy shit, props to behavior. I'm just really scared it's not going to work, and that's going to cause false bans, which causes articles to be posted, which causes negative press of the game, which causes just circle jerks of hate. I can already see the butterfly effect of shit that's going to happen if people get falsely banned for this stuff. So that's why I'm concerned about it. If it works perfectly, then 10 out of 10, but very, very big ifs there. Next, Extreme Hiding update. Updated the AFK Detection system. If a player has AFK crows, they will lose collision if once they have 3 of them. This is just a blanket great change. A lot of people have suggested this. This makes it so a killer cannot hold a survivor hostage. And I guess there's no vice versa. The killer can just hit the survivor, but it just makes it so people can't be held hostage by doing this. That's completely fine. I cannot think of a single downside to this at all. Perfect. Bloodweb spending improvements. They have finally added the bulk blood point spending. I don't know why it's not loading this in this picture, but it looks like this. It looks good. You just basically say how many levels I want, hit the button, and it's just going to spend all those blood points immediately. Finally, we can actually bulk spend blood points. This is an incredible change. Again, something we've been asking for years and years now. I'm very happy for this. I'm going to actually start getting a lot of P100s now and not just waste tens of millions of blood points because I'm too lazy to keep spamming the button. So perfect change, 10 out of 10. Mori update. This one's a little controversial too. Updated the Mori system so now it can be activated when 2 or more survivors are dead and the following occurs. The second last survivor is hooked and on struggle phase. The final survivor is one of the in the following states: healthy, injured, or dying. Basically, it's just saying the other survivor exists. So what they're trying to say is with this change, killers should be able to activate their Mori earlier, so as long as victory is assured, removing the need to wait for any hooked survivors to be sacrificed. This will help players on both sides get back into the action sooner. You could make the argument, well, what if this last survivor has unbreakable or something? But it really isn't abusable in any way, because if one of the 2 survivors is on a hook, it's not like he can get off the hook. So he's dead. If there's no one to save him, there's nothing he can do. He's going to die. And this guy, the last guy, if he gets downed, I mean, the killer's not just going to slug him and just let unbreakable possibly happen. You just end the game. That's over. So unless the killer's like malicious and trying to drag the game out, which you can't even do anymore because then they can just abandon. So I know people are going to interpret this as controversial, but it really isn't. It's not abusable in any way at all. It just makes the game end earlier when the game is clearly already over. So I really can't think of any ways to abuse this because they added this caveat, which is very smart. The guy on the hook isn't able to Kobe. There's no chance for him at all. This is completely fine. So I guess you can make the argument that he has the full face cam bar, and then maybe whatever. The game's over at that point. I think this is completely fine. Just saves people more time. Good change. Map offering updates. Finally, map offerings are back to how they used to be a very long time ago, where they are no longer guaranteed offerings, or at least the yellow and brown ones. So now they just grant a flat percentage. I think they said 20% a while ago. I'm not sure if that's still the case. They didn't list it here, but as far as we know, it's a 20% chance to go to that map. And this also cannot be stacked, so you can't have 4 people having the same map offering and get 80%. It doesn't work like that. And also, these are now hidden. So you don't know which map is being incentivized to go to. So this is probably good because a lot of the time, if you see a killer burn like a Midwich offering, what happens? The game doesn't start because someone will Alt F4 or dashboard or just close their game before it loads. There's no penalty for the survivor. No one else has to play that game. It just cancels it before it starts. So if people used really shitty map offerings, people could just leave and not play the game. So this makes it so you can't really do that anymore, so you can't dodge the match, but also it's no longer a guarantee that you're going to actually get that match as well, or that map. So I think that is overall a great change. I'm happy to see guarantees gone now. It was too abusable. Maps are too imbalanced to give people the power to choose where they're going to be going. Maps really kind of determined a lot of where the match would go before it even started. And like I said, that's just too much power to give players. So this is great. Happy with these changes. I think most people will be as well, other than like Scratch Me or Myers or something, whose stocks are going to go way the fuck down now, because now you cannot guarantee you get Larry's or something, and you might spawn on an outdoor map where you're absolutely useless. So it will have some negative ramifications on a couple of things, but for the most part, this is good for the game. Next, spawn rules updates. This is something I've been asking for, I don't know, 6 years now probably, and we finally have it. This is incredible. So adjusted the following spawn rules. Survivors spawn as close together as possible, which is great. Survivors will always spawn on the same floor, which is great. And the killer will not spawn at the center of maps, which is very good. I can't really describe how detrimental it is to spawn in the center of a map as killer, especially if something like Corrupt Intervention, it completely ruins that. When you spawn in the center of a map as killer, you have 360 degrees to guess where the survivors spawn. There's no real guarantee when a killer spawns there. When a killer spawns in a corner, you have a cone to search. That's far, far easier to detect people. And you just basically choose something in, a 90-degree angle, and you will find a survivor. That's why spawning in corners is so much better as killer. So now you will always spawn in like a side or a corner or something like that, and you will never spawn in the center, which is really, really good. This is a massive, massive buff to killer. It might be understated. People might not appreciate how much of a buff this is, but this is truly a huge, huge buff to killer. So survivors spawning together also is a huge buff to killer, but I think never spawning in the center is an even bigger buff. But this is really good because the whole optimal way you play Dead by Daylight is you spread out. And a lot of the times, the killer will just get screwed over, and the survivors will just spawn spread out, one to each generator. And those are the games where you lose 3 generators in 90 seconds, and there's not much you can do about it. Even if you're the best killer player on the planet, you can't be in 3 places at once. And if all the survivors already spawn there predetermined, then it's just such a huge advantage to survivors based totally on RNG and luck. And that was always incredibly frustrating. So now we have consistent rules. This is a slight nerf to survivor, but this is a huge buff to killer. So this is overall a really good change. I originally had the whole idea of like that early game collapse system, like the whole trial warm-up, I called it. A lot of people had this idea where everything would go a lot slower until the first chase happened in order to equalize killers with map control and killers that don't have map control. But this is honestly, I think, a completely fine alternative, because this will make it so survivors cannot have that free, insane head start by just getting lucky with their spawn. So this is a really good change. It is killer-sided, make no mistake, but it's one that is absolutely justified in my opinion. They've also changed the Shroud of Binding and Shroud of Separation and changed their names and changed their effects to spawn survivors apart from each other. So they're basically switching the roles from killer and survivor as it should be. These make, obviously, perfect sense. Shroud of Separation and Shroud of Vanishing changed its effect to nullify offerings that change survivor spawn locations. So I guess the killer is going to be able to not reverse it, but just nullify it in general, and it'll make it so, or survivors will be able to nullify it in general, make it so they can spawn spread out again. Sorry, these things are confusing because they make no sense. I always confuse them in my brain because I always think about them logically, how it would make sense, because, the killer wants the survivors to spawn together, but they have the offering to make them spawn spread out. So I've jumbled my words here a bit because it's just, they're reversed in my head because it makes no sense. So overall, very good. We have gamma adjustments as well. This is basically to equalize console and PC, which is fine. Obviously, console players can't use reshade or anything like that. I don't use reshade. I just have a monitor with built-in brightness settings, so I don't really need this stuff, but this is fine. I think this is okay. There's a huge difference between the absolute darkest you can put it and the absolute brightest you can put it. They might say, oh, it's a huge buff to Survivor. It's a huge buff to Killer. A huge buff to whatever. They can see things so much clearer now. But yeah, but people were already doing this, and it was just kind of unfair to people that were not able to do it because they were playing on their TV, on a console or something like that. This is just equalizing what people are already able to do. So you can look at it like a buff to Killer or Survivor, whoever you want to, call. But really, this is just more fair, and I think that's the main important thing here. So gamma adjustments are completely fine. Yes, this does kill the dark vibes of the map for a lot of people, and I understand how that can be considered frustrating or moving away from horror or whatever. But you can't deny this is something that needed to happen. It was unfair for some people that were unable to do this, so overall, this is a good change. Custom match improvements. There are now 5 spectator slots. This is going to be really good for tournaments and things like that. There are now hotkey inputs to custom games, so you can quickly toggle between which player. It's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4 for the survivors and 5 for the killer. Don't know exactly the numbers, but it'll be basically something like that. And even you can do that on controller as well. So they said not only is custom match easy way to easily play with friends, it's also a valuable tool for coordinating tournament play. To help streamline its use in these environments, we've added hotkey support to various methods of view switching to make casting on the fly even easier. Plus, with increased spectator slots, tournament organizers have the option to give viewers visibility of all players in a match at once, which is really, really cool. Different streams for different that's awesome. So no downsides here. They're also going to be doing those further changes that they talked about previously, but not happening now. The artist is getting some changes to some add-ons. We don't really know exactly how it's going to work. They just said the artist is in a solid place balance-wise and boasts useful add-ons that meaningfully change how her kit works. To encourage even more pick variety among these, we've adjusted her top and bottom performing add-ons to bring their usefulness more in line with other options. So we're just going to be seeing some artist add-on changes. I really only ever use, I think, Tar and Festering Carrion for like the longer bird, and it takes longer to get the birds off. That's always been my favorite. So no more information on this. I'll talk about it when we see the actual notes. Lich is getting, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is a buff or a side grade again. I feel like they're so scared to buff the Lich, even though he's not particularly amazing. He's just a weaker Dracula, but a couple of really huge buffs. I would say this leans more towards buffs until we have more information exactly about what's happening. But first of all the Lich's spells are available at the start of a trial, which means you can start the match, see people with Lethal Pursuer, activate Fly, and get to them much quicker. Again, Blight and Ghoul and Billy and all these killers can still get there faster, so it's not like some huge crazy thing, but that's really nice to start with your abilities off cooldown. I previously talked about how it was stupid that there are much stronger killers that have their abilities not on cooldown. Either remove that ability or give that ability to other people. It looks like they're giving the ability to other people, which is completely fine. They've also reduced the cooldown of all spells. How much that is will be a huge factor in determining how much he's actually buffed. If it's just, 2 seconds, who gives a shit? If it's like 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds, now we're looking at kind of like an eyebrow raiser, like, okay, that's pretty good. So we'll need some numbers on this one there. Dispelling Sphere now starts quickly and slows down over time, so they basically kind of reversed it. Right now, it shoots out slowly and then grows to full size and then proceeds at its normal speed. Now it's going to shoot out fast and then slow down towards its end. This will make it far more usable in Chase, which is really good when you have people that are using, the Boots of the Interloper that give them haste when Mage Hand is used, for example. You really want to negate those things or it makes your powers worse. Additionally, considering they are buffing those items. So I think what they're trying to do with this line and this line is make Dispelling Sphere an active chase thing as well, which is cool. It incentivizes more than just doing 2 things in a chase. Now you're using your entire kit in a chase, which is kind of cool. And hitting Dispelling Sphere now should be a lot easier because it's going to launch out much faster, negating those newly buffed items and things like that. So I see what they're doing here. I see the vision, and I think it's good overall. They increase the attack cooldown period after Fly ends. This seems like a nerf. I can't tell if they're trying to say increase the attack cooldown recovery, like they're buffing this, or they're making it so you have to wait longer to fly. I don't really see the need to nerf that. If that's the case, Fly is still weaker than Bat Form, in my opinion. Bat Form can be used whenever the fuck he wants. You can swing like 1.4 seconds out of it. It's just better than Fly in every way, so this does not need to be nerfed. If that's the case, this line is very silly. Increase the duration and movement speed of Fly. That's very good, especially considering you can use it at the start. I can see Lethal Pursuer being really nice to get a chase going within 10 seconds of the match starting. Really nice there. So that's a very, very welcome buff for Fly. Adjusted Mage Hand hold time to make it consistent for both killers and survivors resolving a known bug. This one, I'll be honest, I don't know what this means. I'm not even going to further comment. I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me. The 3 people that still play Vecna will tell me, but I don't know what that means. Increase the effects of magic add-ons when casting associated spells. So like I said, they're going to be like probably buffing Boots of the Interloper from 7% to 10% haste, but at the same time, Dispelling Sphere is now going to have a shorter cooldown, will not start on cooldown, and also starts much faster, or the actual movement starts faster, so it'll be much easier to negate these items mid-chase. So I feel like overall this is a buffed effect now, but it requires more active use of Dispelling Sphere to not be considered a side grade to avoid the buffs to his items. Overall, though, I think this is really good. I think these are great changes, and I can't wait to see the actual numbers and things like that. But overall, I love Vecna. It's so underwhelming to play him because I'm always just like, why am I not playing Dracula? He's just better in every way. So hopefully that makes him a bit closer there. Next, we're going to be getting some buffs to Call of Brian, Dark Devotion, Retribution, Machine Learning, Superior Anatomy, Terminus, Thrilling Tremors, and Thwack. Of all the ones that I'm surprised to see a buff is machine learning. That is kind of surprising because machine learning is already a pretty decent perk that gives a very significant amount of haste. They might be giving it even more haste or something since they kind of removed the whole haste stacking thing and they've been trying to like, well, I guess they re-added back, but I don't know. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with machine learning. That perk is already pretty solid. Everything else here, I could justify seeing buffs. Call of Brine is pretty bad now. Dark Devotion is situationally useful. Retribution sees almost no use because there are just simply better hexes to use. Superior Anatomy is pretty decent on certain killers. Maybe they'll make the cooldown better. I'm not sure here because the actual effect itself is quite good. Terminus, same thing. Pretty decent perk, but not like quite as good as Noed, for example. It lacks kind of the surprise factor. Thrilling Tremors, I think, is really nice for information and slight game delay, but overall, I could see a buff here. And Thwack, I agree, is a pretty shitty perk, so that's great. So again, we'll see numbers coming up pretty soon here, but I think it's great to even start buffing these. And for the Survivor perks, we'll be getting, I suppose, buffs to Body Knowledge, Champion of Light, Counterforce, Desperate Measures, Empathetic Connection, Exaltation, and Light-Footed. So some of these make me raise an eyebrow. It says these perks have lower performance, so they're introducing buffs. Botany Knowledge does not need a buff. Botany Knowledge is a very, very good perk already. I have no idea why they would buff this. I do not want to see Botany Knowledge buffed at all, unless it's a very minor thing like made the medkit efficiency penalty smaller by a little bit or something. That would be fine, I guess. But if they're increasing the percentage of the heal on Botany Knowledge when it's already one of the best healing perks in the game, that would be a head scratcher. I am not looking forward to that at all. Champion of Light, again, is also an already very strong perk. I think it's really good. I'm sure you might have seen Zubat videos. A lot of people are doing these videos where you have Sprint Burst fixated to Champion of Light, and you can regenerate your exhaustion and run while you're using a flashlight. You run at full speed. So there are very, very strong builds involving Champion of Light. So I can't imagine buffing it even more because it's already pretty damn good. So I'm really surprised there. Counterforce, completely fine. Desperate Measures is a low-key sleeper perk in my opinion, but fine. Empathetic Connection, fine. Exaltation, fine. And Light-Footed. Oh, God. I already hate the fact that Light-Footed makes no sounds happen. But I will admit, it's very situational. You have to be healthy. So I could see a small buff there. But these ones I'm concerned about. I don't think these two need buffs at all. I think they're already pretty solid. So, yeah. I would say my opinions on this patch lean a bit more towards killer-sided here. But overall, these are things that are, if they work correctly, especially with this stuff, if they work correctly, this is going to be fantastic. Very big if, though. This is behavior we're talking about. They have not been known to handle automated systems very well at all. So we'll see. The PTB is going to be dropping tomorrow. Obviously, I and the entirety of existence will be checking out Springtrap. So hopefully see you guys tomorrow to go into the nitty-gritty of all of that stuff and the actual patch notes themselves. So a lot of videos coming out tomorrow, and that should be it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.